question. I'd like to hear from everyone on the panel. 2/3 of ex-offenders will end up back in prison within 3 years of their release. What, in your opinion, are the main challenges that inmates experience after leaving prison that leads to this statistic?
Not being able to get a job, become employed. You need to become employed within at least 2 months after your release, and if you can't, then you usually reoffend and return back to prison. Housing is an issue. If you have a felony, you can't get public housing. There's just a lot of issues, but the main one is not being able to get a job, not having any support, a support system set up once you're released to help you out until you can make it on your own.
Yeah, I would echo that and say at least the inmates I know are typically maximum security, and a lot of them have sort of long ago lost family support systems, and so there's just you know, if and when they do get out, there's a profound sense of isolation and disconnect. So not only do they not have jobs, they don't have really anybody to help them figure out what to do next or even where to stay.
I would agree with all that. First, let me say I'm really pleased to be able to be here tonight and talk about particularly correctional education. We don't get a chance to do that a lot, I think, and a lot of the news coverage, I think, sometimes overlooks correctional education. So I'm happy to be here, and I want to thank UAB and WBHM for hosting this event tonight. I think it's a very important dialogue. I would agree with the other two panelists. I also have another theory that we're working at the college. We have the reputation of being the trade school. That's what we're referred to often. And the notion is as one of the panelists mentioned, that if we can somehow get an inmate a marketable skill and send them back out into society, all is well. And I think it's a tad more complicated than that. I think one of the reasons I think it's complicated because many of our students come to us with skills already. Some of them will come as highly skilled tradesmen or have other kinds of professions. Sometimes they come to us with a profession they cannot return to because of the nature of their offense. And so often what we find out is that a lack of a trade or a marketable skill may be an issue, but it may not be all of the issue in its entirety. One of the things that we believe is that, and I think this has been mentioned before, is it's the absence of life skills. People know how to do a job very well, but what they cannot do is manage their life. They don't know how to do conflict resolution. They don't know how to work and play well with others. They don't have the ability to deal with authority very well. And that translates into stress in their life, broken relationships, those kinds of problems. So one of the things that we've implemented at the college this past January, and we're pilot testing this program at Tutwiler Prison for Women, is a life skills program. We're partnering with Healthy You and other agencies to make sure that in addition to job skills training and in addition to the education programs that we offer, we are also going to offer a healthy dose of life skills.
So you mentioned the need for life skills, the need to get job training to get a job. We just heard from the last panel that the prison system is very overcrowded, underfunded. So while this does seem like a very good idea, is it something that can be offered to prisoners in a large group?
Well, obviously funding is a problem. We're a part of the Department of Post-Secondary, and as an education entity, which is a good thing, we get our funding from the Education Trust Fund, which is the healthier of the two funds that Senator Ward talked about earlier. However, it is not an unlimited source of money, and there are competing tensions for those dollars, and we don't fare well always. For example, in FY 12-13, the prison education budget was cut 12.5% by the state legislature, which I found puzzling in light of all the problems that are facing the prisons and the fact that correctional education can help. But there are many, many competing tensions. Senator Cam Ward rightly talked about the political pressures associated with funding anything correctional. So you can imagine the dialogue of a politician back to his constituents when he said he voted to provide funding for convicted felons to get educated, but we did not meet all the needs of our K-12 population. That would go over like the proverbial lead balloon. So consequently, we're always fighting and struggling for those dollars. I think it's important to note that the RAND Corporation, which is a national think tank that conducts research to inform policymakers and strategists, they've done considerable research in this area, and there is no debate As Commissioner Thomas mentioned earlier, correctional education can make a difference. It can transform lives, help people become responsible citizens if they choose to participate in that, and at a good return on the investment. The RAND study indicates that for every dollar invested in correctional education, you actually get a $4 to $5 return on 3-year incarceration costs. So this is a program that can pay for itself if properly funded. So I think we do have the capability to reach a larger population than we're doing now, and we do have the possibility of providing the robust programs that we need to more of those inmates. But I think funding is critical. We have to be properly funded to do so.
And for programs that aren't funded by the state, there are many outside programs, for instance, like the work that Dr. Chapman does through the UAB lecture series. And that works to educate prisoners while they're still incarcerated, but not specifically a rehabilitation program, a life skills program. Lectures range from many things, history, baseball, art. So why are programs like UAB's prison lecture series at Donaldson important for Alabama prisoners?
I would say that they're important mainly because the inmates really seem to like them. I mean, these are not lectures that have any sort of direct pragmatic value. We're not teaching the faculty. And I will say the lecture series has been running for almost 30 years. And it runs because UAB faculty have been incredibly generous about volunteering, donating their time. And one reason it's been such a robust success, we've almost doubled the number of lecturers that we've sent out, that we're sending out a year, just in the last couple of 3 years. And one reason is because the inmates themselves are really terrific. I don't think I've had a single faculty member contact me afterwards and said that did not, they all say that incredibly exceeded my expectations. I really want to go back next year. So, I mean, we're talking a lot about rehabilitation and recidivism, and those are incredibly important. I also wanted to point out we have a tremendous percentage of our prison population who are not getting out. I mean, they are going to, most of the men that I know at Donaldson, many of whom I like and admire and find to be incredibly thoughtful, intelligent people, are not going anywhere. So I think we also have to, part of the conversation has to be, certainly it's about the economics and about getting people reintegrated, but I think we also have to think about how do we treat the men who, to be honest, they're probably going to die at Donaldson or a comparable facility unless there are changes that would allow release frankly, for elderly inmates. I mean, we're looking at the graying of the inmate population.
I would agree with Dr. Chapman on the value of the work that she does. We see it in our own college in little ways. For example, there was something we viewed on TED Talks. It's Before I Die, I Want To. And we had that as a part of a curriculum one time that we offered. And what it speaks to is the humanity of everyone, whether you're behind bars or not. And everybody needs to grow and nurture and get it back in touch with that. And I think it's extremely healthy for inmates to be able to express and nurture and in some ways rehabilitate themselves by using the arts. I think that's tremendous value. One of the things we know about education is some of the most valuable things of education you cannot see immediately. But there are long-term effects of education. Those are the things that we should not forget about. And those are the things that often are not funded. That's why it's a tribute to UAB and other programs. Auburn's another program that does this kind of work, that go into the prisons without remuneration, other than a sense of reward that you get to work and you get to make a difference in someone's life. These are very, very valuable programs that I think have great benefit to the population.
I agree with that. All programming is very important to inmates upon their release, but once they leave that prison, that programming cannot stop. We learn a lot in there, but when we get out and all of a sudden we meet with resistance in the community where no one will hire us, no matter what I took in trade school, no one will hire us, no matter how many classes I've taken. When you walk up and they look at you and they do a background check, they close the door. Okay, I found that most Alabamians are very unforgiving when it comes to breaking the crime. Making a crime, breaking the law, they're very unforgiving. until they actually sit and listen to you and watch you and see you perform and see what you're doing, that you're just a normal human being that made a mistake. Okay, this is what I like about Commissioner Kim Thomas. Commissioner Kim Thomas sits and listens. He wants to know. He wants to help. He wants to direct. He wants to give you his opinion, and then he listens to the same from you. Okay, and this is important to us, that you listen to us. There are a lot of offenders that are going to come out, and like I said, I went to JF Ingram, great community college, great, as we call it, the trade school. I took it in '96 and got an associate's degree there, but I didn't get out of prison in 2010, and by that time, everything that I had learned was obsolete. It didn't help, it just didn't help me, okay? So when I got out and I found myself with no job in 2010, then I had to decide right then and there, well, I need to go in business for myself, doing something that I can do at my age. And what I did was I went into the lawn care business, and I now co-own a lawn care landscaping business out of Huntsville that does quite well. I wanted to take that and teach the offenders that are coming out from behind me, teach them what I did that was so simple, to be able to pay my bills and be able to live in a house and be able to drive a vehicle and work side by side other people, be an equal, okay? That most of the people in the community probably don't even know I'm an ex-felon, okay, because I don't carry myself that way. This is all cognitive behavior changes. It changes you and what you learn. We give cognitive behavior, we give life skill classes, entrepreneur classes, and we teach you hands-on how to operate heavy equipment, lawn care equipment. This is all a nonprofit organization, and we take people that are rough around the edges or that just have not had an opportunity to be anything in their life, and we give them that opportunity, and we follow through with it. Once we have trained them, we find employment for them in that field, and then for 9 months, we say, we are there to answer questions, to help any problems they may have, to help them solve those problems. As a long-timer, when I was released after serving 15 years, I had not seen a laptop. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was the silliest looking thing I ever saw, and I couldn't figure out how it would possibly work, okay? I just couldn't figure out where the big picture was. I didn't know a cell phone. Oh, I laughed so hard at a cell phone, especially a little flip phone. I didn't know you had to flip it, so I didn't know how it worked and couldn't answer it a couple of times. Okay, these are the things that y'all take for granted because you've been here as this technology has come to be. But people who haven't seen it don't know it. I cried the first time I pumped gas because my 8-year-old grandson had to show me which button to push, because when I went in, you just flipped it up and stuck it in and said, turn it on, and they did, and you were in business. Well, I had went in and paid for the gas, came back out, put the nozzle in. There wasn't anything to flip, and I just kept waving, turn it on, and my 8-year-old grandson got out and said, press that yellow button right there, which I thought was an advertisement spot. Okay? We take all this for granted, that everyone knows this, but we don't. Okay, when you have an offender that comes out that served 10, 15 years, 22 years, this technology they're lost, okay? The first time I went into a Walmart, I was lost. I wanted to cry because everybody wasn't going in the same direction. Okay, you know how you go down the hall and up the hall. But everybody was going crossways, and it just really caused me to have a panic attack. These are the things that the community is going to have to help people with when they get out. You can't expect them to spend the rest of their life in prison, and when they do get out, if you will just help someone step up and step out, then you will see what they can become. Mr. Lavoie visited us in Huntsville on our job site. He saw the felons that I work. He saw what we do. We make a difference in the community because, see, these people are not going to reoffend. They're paying their restitution, paying their child support, and they're making a living. And that's what life's all about. So, yes, education is very important, not just inside, but once they get out. And programming is important. And we do need funding for these programmings. And someone's going to have to step up and say, hey, let's program these people.
And you mentioned that people should reach out to people that have come out of prison and help them learn these things. But the reality of it is a lot of people, they don't want to deal with ex-offenders. People don't want to give them jobs. They don't want ex-offenders moving into their neighborhood. So I'll direct this to everyone on the panel, starting with Dr. Dassinger. How do you overcome something like that, which is so prevalent in society? People just not wanting to have a part in this.
It's said every system's perfectly designed to produce the results it's currently yielding. And so when you talk about something like this, you're talking about a whole system of issues, starting with law and policy. For example, that someone that has committed a crime, served their time, gone out, and has to check a box on an employment application that says, I'm an ex-felon, is a step in the wrong direction. There's a ban the box movement across the country. I think we ought to embrace that, if we really believe that, in fact, they've done their time. So a part of it is policy, a part of it is law. Part of it is nonprofit organizations willing to step forward, which they seem to be. A part of it is being more intentional in terms of making the transitions from incarceration and education in the system, pardons and paroles, and we'll hear from the executive director on the next panel, and transition back in the community. We need to be more intentional instead of it being kind of haphazard and somebody getting lucky that they got connected with somebody. It needs to be intentional so that every person has the opportunity to successfully transition back into a community, and that community is ready to receive them. These ideas are being tested across the country, where communities are being set up with support mechanisms that include employment, counseling, and those kinds of things to make sure that, in fact, transition is successful. Otherwise, we'll experience what we're seeing now, because it's going to keep on happening. If you keep on doing what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. You know that one. And that is, 32 to 67% of the people that get out will come back in within 3 years. And we can do better than that.
Do you have anything, Dr. Chapman?
Yeah, I don't want to speak outside my expertise since all I do is organize a lecture series, so I don't have a lot of contact with, sort of real world issues of getting people out and, getting them back into the community. But I think I will speak to something that I think is at the heart of your question, which is that I see good, well-intentioned, smart people who would do their darndest not to stereotype other people on the basis of age, class, race, any other sort of category, are in the grip of an incredibly powerful and entrenched stereotype about the inmate. And I see this when I contact and lecturers say, well, what would I talk to inmates about? And then they say, well, I could talk to them about, and it's some version of captivity, tragedy, as if those are the only things that inmates want to talk about. And so my experience, one reason I'd like to think the lecture series has run so well is that we really get faculty and other sort of community volunteers to go out and talk to these men like what they are, real human beings who want to know about the history of the Berlin Wall and latest computer programming with robots. So, I think I would hypothesize that one of the problems with reentry that Juanita ran into is that as soon as people put the label inmate on her, that changed the stakes.
And Juanita, another question for you specifically. So you were inside for 15 years, and now you work with people who are coming out of prison. From what you've heard from the people that you mentor and work with, have the problems that inmates and former inmates that you work with grown more complicated, or excuse me, or are they different than when you were in prison?
They're basically the same. When they come out, they find the same problem with no housing and people, not giving them a chance at a job, and they don't want to be dependent upon their family to take care of them. We're grown people. We're supposed to be taking care of our own self and taking care of our own business. But when you come out and someone hires you and then they tell you a day later, we ran a background check on you, and I even thought about it. It was just really funny when I filled out my first application and it said, who have you worked for the last 15 years? I started to put Alabama Department of Corrections, to see maybe if I could get a job, because I really, it was just that bad, because it said, have you been convicted in the last 7 years? And no, I hadn't been, I was convicted 15 years ago, so I really wasn't lying on either box, okay? But then I said, I better clarify this, because I sure don't want to get caught off in a lie. So I went ahead and clarified it, and they said, sorry, we can't use you. Didn't matter that, I have a degree. It didn't matter that I'm intelligent or whatever, and I'm perfectly capable of answering a phone now, okay? But it didn't matter. So it didn't make any sense to me. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? I was asking myself, what am I supposed to do to pay my bills? And I said, well, it looks to me like I'm going to have to go in business for myself doing something. And I had no idea what I was going to go in business doing. But lawn care has been great because one thing's for sure, God's got, no matter how bad the economy gets, you got to have your grass cut. Okay? And I'm the person to call. I'll see that now today I see that it gets done. But I was using that mower. I was riding that mower more than I was doing anything else. But you know what I'm saying? If I had not been given that opportunity, I don't know if I would have, in some point in time, reoffended. And probably, I was a violent offender, okay? And I know my crime would never have been violent, okay? Believe that. My second crime would never have been violent. But maybe I'd have had to steal something to eat or something had I not been given that opportunity. I mean, you've got to realize I left prison with $31 and a bus ticket, okay? And was told to do good after 15 years. Now, if somebody turns you out, and that's all you've got to your name. I mean, what do you do? Really, what did you do? Okay? And then sometimes whenever you leave, they send you back to the county where you committed your crime, and of course everybody knows you've come in there. Okay? So you're already facing resistance. You can't hire her because, she did this and she did that. So you don't have an opportunity in life. Okay? But yet you say we've paid our debt to society. Our victim's okay with us getting out, or our victim's family. And the parole board's okay with us getting out, or we've ended our sentence and we've paid our debts. Just how long do we have to pay after we're released? How much more time should we have to serve? I watch these people get out. I've got a gentleman that works for me now. He was in prison for 22 years. He was out almost 2 years before he found employment with us. Because I met his mother at I believe it was at Kroger's grocery store. And she saw the name thing on the back of my shirt and asked me, did I have any openings? And I said, yes, ma'am, I probably have. And she said, my son's been in prison. He's been out for a while now and can't find employment.
Lucky to run into you. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how it goes. See, God has a plan. So I follow what God says is to help someone. If you help someone every day of your life, no matter how tiny that little help is, just think about how good it would be.
And I'd like to welcome J.J. Pruitt to the panel.
How y'all doing down there?
Great.
Good.
Can I ask you a question? Are you settled in enough?
I'm settled in, ready to go.
Well, we're talking about rehabilitation of offenders, something that your group, the Dannon Project, works very closely on. Mm-hmm. And you have a very powerful personal story behind why you became involved in offender rehabilitation. So how is your understanding of forgiveness and giving people new chances changed over the course of your work?
Well, I don't know if everybody knows why we started the Dannon Project, my wife and I, but my youngest brother, Dannon, was killed by a very good friend of mine that I played football with in high school. The friend that I was referring to, he was a regular kid in high school, great athlete, just decided after high school to start selling drugs. And my brother ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time and ended up getting shot and killed. And you were talking about forgiving. I didn't want to see my friend for a very long time. But after a while, I started, reading about forgiveness. And, when you read in the Bible and the scriptures, you start hearing that, you seeing that word a whole lot about forgiveness. And one of the things that I read one time was that if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. So after I read that, I decided to reach out to this person who had shot and killed my brother, and ended up talking to him, and he explained what was going on and said that he was really sorry. I told him that if nobody else forgives him, that I did, and I told him that he had a friend. And after that point, he's actually donated clothes to the Dannon Project. He's done a lot of things for the Dannon Project, and we hope one day for him to be able to come and to tell his story about how tough it was for him, because it was very tough for us. But that forgiveness took about 10 years. I'll be honest with you, it took about 10 years, but after reading that passage, I knew that there was some point in time I was going to have to forgive him for what he did. And because of that, out of a tragedy, something great happened. We couldn't save my brother, and we couldn't save my friend from prison or committing the act. But what we have done is over the last 13 years, we have tried to provide reentry services to nonviolent ex-offenders, whether it's adults, whether it's, we just started something with youth a couple of years ago, ages 16 to 24. And over that time period, the last 13 years, we've helped over 7,500 ex-offenders, or participants we call them, because once you do your time, you're no longer an ex-offender, you're just a person. Over that time period, 7,500, only about 45 have gone back to jail out of the 7,500. So we're trying, and I do believe that if you have a way to touch someone in this particular field, you should do it. And you should really show them that you love them, because some of these people are just like kids. You know, believe it or not, we have 50-year-old men who have never been told by their family, hey, I love you. They've never heard the words, I love you, coming from a family member or a friend. So if you think that they're hard, all they really are, they just want to be loved like everybody else. And it's going to take us to do that. It's going to take each and every one of us to do that. I hope I've answered that a little bit anyway.
So you mentioned love and support being some of the things that people need. And from what you say, the programs that the Dannon Project does are very successful. So besides this love and support, in your experience, what are the most important needs that need to be taken care of to prevent someone recently released from reoffending? We've heard jobs is a big one, but what else?
Well, first and foremost, and I'm sure Juanita can probably say, you know, when you first get out, the first thing you probably need, if your family doesn't want to have anything to do with you, and in the state of Alabama, when you are released, they give you a bus ticket anywhere you want to go, and 15. 10, yeah. Well, maybe it's 10. $10. And now keep in mind, that's just for a regular offender. We're not talking about somebody who has contracted a disease like AIDS inside of prison. What is $10 going to do? They can't even get their medicine. So what you have to do is, when you get out there, you have to make sure, first and foremost, that they have a mental evaluation of the experience that they just went through. You have to make sure that they have housing. Some of the people have only the clothing on their back, so you have to provide that. But most importantly, after all of that, and provide health care, because some of them, as you know, the food is not very good in there, is it, Juanita?
No.
It's not very good.
It could be improved.
It could be improved. So you have to provide, you have to give them a health evaluation. So we do all of this, and at the end, once we get all of that established, then we start trying to say, hey, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And that's when we try to find out what type of job they want to have, because our main goal is to find them jobs. Believe it or not, people who have committed crimes or people who are getting out of prison, they don't want a handout. They want to live a normal life. All it takes is people to give them a chance. You know, I know plenty of people, and I'm going to be honest, I was one of them when we first started. I used to look at person who came out of prison, because where I'm from, there was a lot of people that came in and out of prison. I used to look at him and say, man, that guy is just, you know, what is he doing? You know, all they want is just a chance, a second chance. And that's what our motto is. We provide second chances. And if you do what we ask you to do, then you can get that. Because number one, as you talked about, it is finding a job first. But before all of that, you have to make sure that the person is well taken care of mentally, physically, and you know, you're not worrying about looking for a job if you don't have a place to stay, right? If you don't have but, you know, a pair of Dickies and a t-shirt, it's hard to find a job. So you got to provide all of those things that you need in order for them, before they even start trying to find a job first.
And I'll say one thing about Dannon Project. They contacted us, and we formed a landscape and a lawn care and landscape crew for them. And their people would come out and they would work. They would cut advanced autos, and I think they cut about 13 to 14 in this area, and they did an excellent job. They worked long hours and they worked very hard, but they did look for them They do look for them jobs and everything, you know. And these people are like, the main thing about people that come out of prison, another thing is you've got to realize we have been under authority for a long time. I was under for 15 years, and my main thing when I came out, if a teenager, say 17, 18, spoke to me, I said, yes, ma'am, because we were taught, you know, to show that respect, okay? So I looked weird saying yes, ma'am, to a 17-year-old, but I've been under 22 and 23-year-old guards, so yes, ma'am, them too. So that's just how you do. But you got to realize we're not as hard to handle as y'all might think we are, because we're disciplined. Okay, we've been taught discipline. We've been underneath the hands of the officers that have taught us what we're supposed to do, and we're supposed to do it on time, and how we're supposed to do it, and do it a certain way. So we're actually easier to bring in and work. And we require very small amounts. That we don't have to have 5 or 6 suits of clothes. 2 will work. We had 3 in prison, but we can do it with 2. And we don't have to have steak. We can eat those soups because we lived on them. So you see, we're low maintenance. Just give us a job where we can step up and start taking care of ourselves. And that's what they want. That's what makes you a valuable person in your own mind, is to be able to make your own living. I mean, if tomorrow someone took your job, took all your money out the bank, and took your income, you would feel like you were nothing, because you were going to have to go around and ask somebody, will you help me get something to eat? That's what makes you feel worth something, is when you can support yourself. So we need outreach programs that do connect like a chain, a solid chain, with DOC and with us and with them and with the next person, until this chain is so solid that it can't be broken. And we get these people back out into society, get them to be productive members, get them on a payroll, instead and off the taxpayers' dollars. Start letting go of some of this money for the general fund to be able to fund programs, and for them to be able to do more for the inmates, and get them back started. Now you might say, but do they deserve it? They broke the law, so they deserve what they're getting. Believe me, prison's not nice. All the money in the world is not going to make prison nice. Think about going into a prison, and this is one of the tiniest little things that really bothered me after 15 years. You never get to touch an animal like a dog or a cat. You don't know how much you miss that, okay? You don't know. You never get to go outside at dark, okay? So you don't get to go out there and look at the moon and smell the night air. You don't get to go outside after dark, okay? Unless it's a major emergency like a dorm's on fire or something. That's the only time you're going to crack that door at night. So, I mean, you see, these little tiny things you take for granted. Okay, these individuals, we do pay while we're in there.
And
we pay dearly.
Oh, and sorry, we do have some audience questions I do want to get in. We have just about 5 to 10 more minutes left in our panel. One from the audience, what's different between the programs in prison and the programs for prisoners after they're released, and how can those be better tuned to the needs of prisoners? And do you want to start?
Well, in terms of the programs that we offer 17 trade programs. We offer adult basic education, GED preparation, and in that sense, all the programs are exactly the same that you could get at a community college in the free world. So those programs are very much the same. In fact, if someone leaves our program, they can pick up where they left off at a local community college, because we're part of the community college system. So if they don't finish with us, they can continue on there. So in that sense, they're the very same, and it makes no difference as to what their standing was coming out of prison or not, if that answers your question.
And what needs to be done to kind of bridge that gap between coming out of prison in programs and then finding other programs? Are there currently services that the Department of Corrections or other groups have that can connect people coming out of the prison system to these?
I think connect is a good word. I mean, we've heard already that there are all sorts of groups out there, and you saw the kind of model is that I ran across somebody in a grocery store kind of thing. And that's not very systematic, and because of that, people will fall through the cracks. And I think that's what we need to focus on systematically, is making sure, in fact, that we do have strong connections across all of the systems, whether it's healthcare, social services, jobs, or the like. In fact, I think we have an obligation as a college to help with that. So we have a job placement coordinator where we work with inmates to try to help them secure employment post-release. Juanita did mention a problem. We're sometimes rolling the dice about when we offer our programs to inmates. We kind of target people that are within 9 years of potential release. Sometimes that happens correctly, sometimes it does not. because sometimes a sentence is ended early, or sometimes, they don't make parole, and so they're kept a little bit longer. We're trying to get better at that. We're working with the Department of Corrections to get better at that so we can predict, so that in fact when they get out, they have skills that are contemporary. We do offer an employment guarantee. If someone hires one of our graduates and their skills are not fresh, they can actually go free of charge to any community college in the system and get a refresh on those skills that we've taught them. So we do have that as an option as well. We do pay attention to make sure that the programs that we offer are viable. We try to refresh those all the time. We just closed 2 programs recently because they appeared on the Alabama declining occupation list. And so we closed those to make sure that the programs that we offer inmates, in fact, do stand a chance. So I think it's making more intentional, systematic connections between all of the systems that handle, respond to, and provide support to inmates. And that's going to take a huge effort. I think the work that Senator Ward is going to be doing on the prison task force ought to address that. I don't know if they'll get that far or not, but I think that's important. So those would be the kinds of things I think are needed.
And we do have time for just one more question. Jobs, of course, are a big issue. You bring that up a lot. But how can potential employers be reassured that hiring an ex-offender is safe? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of people looking for work. They could easily just hire someone who had never been in prison.
Yeah, I certainly think that could be a tiebreaker. I can hire employee A without a felony conviction or employee B with one. They look the same, qualified. I mean, it's a risk assessment essentially. So there is no guarantee, but there's no guarantee for anyone. I think we have to educate the public better. I think we have to change the attitudes that Dr. Chapman talked about, or address those attitudes. I think we need to educate the public more. I think forums like this are awesome. Thank you again for doing this, and I hope that there are listeners out there. We haven't gotten any of the tough questions, by the way. I think this is a user-friendly audience, so they've been pitching big fat softballs to us. But I get tough questions sometimes when I go speak to groups, and they want to know why in the world should we even fund these kinds of programs. They get what they deserve, lock them up and throw away the key. And that attitude's pretty prevalent out there. So I think that's a tough situation to find ourselves in.
Well, let's talk more about that. We're trying to talk about rehabilitation and solutions, but how do you deal with the attitudes of people that, well, I don't want ex-offenders living in my neighborhood. They get what they get. Like, why do I care? The first panel talked about why people should, they touched on why people should care about what's going on in the prison system.
Yeah.
Why should people care about what happens to people when they get out of prison? And that's for everyone on the panel.
Yeah. There are 2 reasons. One is a financial reason. We have already talked about that. $445.5 million in 2010 for the Department of Corrections, bumped up to $460 million. 36,000 people in custodial control of DOC in 2012. 26,000 actually behind bars. If you divide that into $445 million, you get $17,000 a year that we're going to be spending. Now that's kind of cheating with statistics a little bit because they actually don't spend that much. But if you just do simple math, that's a lot of money. And so the question becomes, what do we do about that, and do we even care? Particularly if I say lock them up and throw away the key. Well, here's the problem. Nationally, the Bureau of Justice will tell us that 95% of everybody incarcerated today will ultimately get out of prison. Now, there's the 5% that Dr. Chapman talks about, that there are high security, maximum security issues at Donaldson, but 95% are going to get out. That's not a debate. The question is how are we going to send them out? Are we going to send them ready or unready? We send them unready, and then 1 or 2 out of every 3 will be back with us in 2 or 3 years. So I think we have to face the reality of the financials associated with incarcerating people. And you deal with that on the front end at the sentencing, in the middle with rehabilitation, and on the back end with pardons and paroles. It's a complete system. So financial is one issue. And then so you have to ask, is there a better way to do that? So you have to have evidence-based programming, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest what works in terms of rehabilitation. We ought to pursue those. Community corrections, DOC needs more money for community corrections. It's wildly successful. The numbers are clear. Correctional education is wildly successful. We need to properly fund that. And when you do that, you get a financial return on that investment. So that's one. The second thing is the human return on investment. We need to remember that all of these people is somebody's mother, father, brother, sister. In fact, if I ask for a show of hands, there's probably almost everybody in this room that's been personally in touch by incarceration. You're not raising your hand, but I bet there is. I bet there is. Somebody knows somebody. It's somebody's brother, cousin, friend, acquaintance, something like that, and they're human beings, and if we can somehow touch them, and I challenge my faculty on this, if you can affect one person, if you can help them overcome what they've experienced, help them transform their life, then you restore them to their community, to their family. Maybe you can break the cycle of dysfunction in the family, the cycle of poverty, the cycle of lack of education. When you do that, you have this huge domino effect, and you have this nice return on human investment.
And we are quickly running out of time, so can I get the rest of you to weigh in on that quickly?
You go ahead. You go first.
Well, just to piggyback off of what Dr. Dassinger said, you know, they're going to come out, guys, whether you like it or not. So, you know, you don't need to be afraid of that. They're coming out. Do you want them to come back out doing the same things that they did, or do you want to be part of the solution by providing opportunities so that they don't have to go back to doing what they did? It's up to you. And one of the things that you do is, you know, you can start providing programs, and of course, it takes money. I know. You can start providing programs, as Dr. Dassinger said. You can start providing programs, getting them 6 months before they go out, before they come home, finding out what they need to do, and then on top of that, hey, what do you want to do? You want to be an electrician? You want to be a plumber? Okay, well, good. Let's get you in that right direction, and let's go for it. And then you got to provide them the things that they need so that they won't go back, guys. You know, again, if they're hungry and nobody else is there, what do you think they're going to do? What would you do? If you're hungry and you had no other way to get it, what would you do? So don't think that you're that far above people who have been in prison. Because if you were in some of the same situations that they've been, you'd do the exact same thing. If you're hungry, hunger has a way of changing people. You do things that you may not think you would do. Being broke makes you change. So don't think that you're that far above someone who's been incarcerated. You know, you can help, guys. All you got to do is just make sure that when they get out, that you're that gate. You can open up that gate to help them into a new life, a second chance, as we said. You make sure you guys do that, is what Dr. Dassinger said. I mean, they are mothers, they are fathers, they are brothers, they are sisters, and while we're talking about it, while they're in prison, they have sisters, they have brothers, they have kids who could possibly be doing the same thing that they're doing. So you can try to find out what they're doing. Stop them from doing it so that the recidivism rate won't be so high.
And on that note, I think that we are now out of time for this panel, but I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here, and please stick around. We'll change out panels very quickly. We'll be talking about the future of the system up next. Please, a round of applause for everyone. Thank you for participating in the panel. Thank you, everyone.
I'd like to get your folks down.